Welcome to my studio. I'm ill.Gates, aka the Fat Conductor on the Ableton board, and I'm here to tell you a little bit about the studio template that I've created and made available through my website ill.Gates.com. This template is not only a tool, but it represents a distilling of my philosophy of workflow and productivity in the studio. See, there are many aspects of writing electronic music that are not crucial to the songwriting process. Things like sound design and fussing about setting up sends and whatnot. They're repetitive tasks that you're going to do every single time you sit down to write a song. So rather than reinvent the wheel when you sit down to write, you should just be writing. Finish the song while the idea is still hot and fresh. Convey your emotions clearly while you're still in the same headspace and get it done, right? So this template has a system of sampler multi-use that I call making 128s, where you have 128 samples of a given type in a sampler with a knob to select them. Very useful for picking drum sounds. It has a similar system with bass oscillators, where I've created a ton of different bass oscillators and racked that all up into an instrument rack with separate subs and top basses, and it's all very easy to manipulate. And then there's a system of sends that I use with every track, my dub delays and my reverbs and various other effects. And then there's some bussing and there's a demo tune. So without further ado, let's crack it open and see what's going on. Alright, so first things first, let's start with the beat. The beat is a drum kit. I call the main drum kit the muscle beat because it really drives the rhythm section. It's where most of the volume and impact of the sound is, and most of the repetition of the rhythm section in your song is. This is a drum rack into which I've dragged a bunch of 128s. Now, if you don't know what 128s are, you should watch the Eskimon tutorial and download that live pack as soon as possible. I made this tutorial for Eskimo and Amon Tobin called Eskimon. It's available at ESKAMON, and it'll take you through 128s. But 128s are basically a system of organizing your library so that you can preview the sounds in the context of your song and not in the browser, and that you can pick the sounds with your hands and by letting the song develop rather than by picking them one at a time with just you and your ideas of what the song is going to be like in the browser. It's much faster. So let's say you have a kick drum and you've started your track around that kick drum. Well, halfway through the track you might find that the kick drum doesn't fit anymore. So rather than try and wrestle it into place, in my experience, it's more advantageous to set up a sampler with 128 kick drums in it, so you can just turn the knob and find the kick drum that fits. Now, this is a technique that started with drums. I've elaborated it to include many other areas of sound, but making 128s is a really central part of my organization and workflow. So basically, I've made these 128s where you got 128 samples in a rack, and that rack has one knob that serves as a sample selector, and I've saved it to the library. So to drag it into a drum rack, I just go into my instrument racks there, drag it in, boom, there's the sounds. I can use either a MIDI pitch plugin or the sample selector feature here in the sampler to pick the sound. So what I did was I dragged a bunch of these 128s in and found a drum kit that I liked. And then I wanted to reunify the sounds. Like I had a couple different kick sounds. I wanted to treat them as a unit. So anytime you select more than one chain inside of a drum rack, and the chains are viewable here, then you can right click and group. And that puts them into another drum rack inside of a drum rack. So it's like, yo dog, I heard you like drum racks. So I'll put some drum racks in your... Anyway. But yeah, it's a quick and simple way of grouping things together. I've chosen to group some of these sounds because I wanted to reunify and tighten up the kick drums as a whole with this kick drum audio rack that I programmed. Same thing with the snares, etc. You can find a lot of those in the rack pack, and I encourage you to put them in the library. I really can't overstate enough how important it is to have a well-developed library, so you just plug in the sounds in where they go and keeping the whole process rolling. So if you want to change any of the drum sounds in the 128s, you go in here and move the sample selector. And if you want to adjust the sound as a whole, you use these racks. And I've labeled them in plain English so you don't have to read any balding, leather sleeve, ponytail guy books. A few other things that I've done is I've taken the groups of sounds and put their volumes onto these macros on the left. So you can take these macros and introduce and remove the sounds. So here, check it out. I'll show you the different layers of this drum beat that I've made. So first there's the kick. And there's some hi-hats. There's a snare. But that all sounds very flat, so I added a break. Oh yeah. Yeah, pretty simple beat, but it gets the job done. Now, to supplement this drum kit and create a feeling of movement and progression, I've taken a bunch more 128s and dragged them into these two rider channels. And I call these riders because they ride on top of the muscle beat and provide variation and movement and a feeling of escalation and layers and whatnot. So they're really, really simple. I've just dragged a couple 128s of shakers in there and made two riffs. One simple, one faster. And between that and this other rider that I've made that is ride cymbals and then a second pattern, right? You can really create a feeling of movement. Check it out. But yeah, it just keeps things rolling nicely, and I'm sure that you'll find that with if you checkerboard the riders over top of it, it'll create that constantly escalating feeling of rhythmic movement and involvement. The grainer is a little tweakier. This one's probably more for the advanced users, but basically I've loaded a drum loop into this simpler down here, taking a very small loop, and then I'm scrubbing the start position of that with a clip envelope that you can see here. And that all probably sounds very confusing, so I'll just give you an audio example. And you can use that kind of a technique to make weird, like folding kind of breakbeat origami sounds. It's really a fun technique. It's a good way to add accents to your drum beat. So I've added a couple accents there to show you how it works. Next channel is bass. The system of basses that I made is, I feel, one of the real strong points of this template. I've done this by, well, okay, basically the secret to really, really deep, really rich, full basses is to have a separate layer that is only a sine wave below 100 hertz that's either as loud as it goes or off. No compression, nothing really. So if you look at the subs, that's it. It's just rolled off as loud as it goes all the way at the bottom. If I hit a high note, this EQ roll off is going to turn the sub down so I don't deafen anybody. So that separate layer of subs is going to provide a lot of the impact. There's a bunch of different subs in this sampler. You can select them here. That one's my favorite one for this song, so I've left it selected. Then there's a layer of tops. And this has, I think, 128 or so different bass top oscillators that are selected by using this top select function, right? So here, I'll just show you what the sample selector is like. So it starts like this, right? But let's say I'm like, oh, the bass sucks, so I need another bass. Right, very simple to find a bass that you like. I've put a ton of them in there. They're all good to go. Lots of highs, lots of mids, lots of bass. They're ready for action. So rather than fussing around with sound design, I mean, bass sound design is such a hole for time, right? So rather than fussing around with too much bass sound design, I just sample perfect bass oscillators and put them into the 128. So that's really going to help a lot. Now you can make many different kinds of bass using this device by taking advantage of two features. Okay, these two features are, first, the piano, or well, they're anchored in the piano roll. The first is glide. If I turn the glide up, glide represents how long it takes the pitch to slide between two notes that are touching, right? If there's no glide, you can hear it jump right away. If there's a little bit of glide, you'll hear it jump more slowly, like it slides a little bit. Turn the glide up and you got drops or risers. And you can do that without editing any pitch bend automation. So a lot of what you would think of as pitch bends can actually be accomplished with the glide much more easily because you don't have to edit any automation. Another great feature of this, see if you turn the cutoff down on the filter, this filter envelope is going to cause the filter to rise at a speed that's determined by velocity because of this time to velocity. So that means that you can make your whomps also from the piano roll without editing automation. If you turn the velocity down, you get a slow one. Turn it up, it's like there's no envelope there at all. And then if you get it about halfway in the middle and repeat the note, you can kind of fake a wobble. Lots of fun. You can also make wobbles with the LFO here. You turn the amount up there and the speed there. Right? Pretty straightforward. The FM will add frequency modulation to the sample, and that's something that's only possible in Ableton. It really gives you a screaming high end. Like, check it out. You got to really mean it when you bust that one out, though. But yeah, really straightforward to use. Very easy. There's over 100 bass sounds in there, and the system just makes wobbles, whomps, and drops a dream to write. So I think you'll really like it.